In a secluded monastery nestled high on a misty mountain, a young novice monk had earned a reputation for his brilliance. Gifted with a sharp mind, he could easily grasp the profound teachings of ancient Buddhist texts and often dazzled visiting scholars with his insights. His intelligence, however, bred arrogance. He scolded his fellow monks harshly, especially when they failed to understand what seemed so obvious to him. Even the gentle reminders from the abbot fell on deaf ears. He would bow respectfully, offer a polite, "Yes, master," then return to his old ways. One crisp morning, the young monk set off into the forest to gather firewood. With a heart lightened by the beauty of nature and the satisfaction of a full load of wood, he paused by a babbling brook to wash his face. As he leaned down, a curious monkey approached, familiar with humans, as monks often shared food with the mountain creatures. Smiling, the boy gestured toward the stack of wood, asking the monkey to pass him his towel. The monkey, delighted, handed him a stick. The monk chuckled, playfully asked again, this time miming wiping his face. Again, the monkey handed him another stick. The boy laughed, louder this time, thoroughly entertained by the animal's confusion. Later that day, he recounted the amusing moment to the abbot. To his surprise, the old master's face grew serious. "Why?" he asked. "Were you not angry when the monkey didn't understand you?" The boy replied, "Because it's a monkey." The abbot looked at him gently, yet firmly. "And when your fellow monks don't understand, do you not treat them worse? Why is it acceptable for a monkey to misunderstand, but not your brothers in the Dharma?" The young monk blinked, stunned by the realization slowly sinking in. The abbot continued, "Not everyone is born with the same understanding, the same path. Some plant rice, others recite scripture. You do not know the soil others come from, yet you trample on it." A long silence followed, thick with emotion. The young monk lowered his eyes. "Master, I was wrong," the abbot smiled. "True wisdom is not in knowing much, it is in showing compassion." And at that moment, a once arrogant boy took his first real step on the path of true enlightenment. The sun beat down harshly on the New Orleans docks, casting long shadows over crates of spoiled fruit and the stench of overripe bananas. Most vendors turned their noses up at the mess, muttering curses and walking away. But one man, Samuel Zemere, a Russian immigrant with worn boots and calloused hands, stood still, eyes fixed on the discarded fruit as if he had just discovered gold. To everyone else, those bruised bananas were waste, too soft, too spotted, and too ripe to sell. But to Zemere, they were possibility. He had seen the hunger in the eyes of the poor, families barely scraping by, children with empty stomachs. And here lay food, imperfect but edible, abandoned by merchants too proud to sell it cheap. With a borrowed cart and a few coins in his pocket, he started small, buying up the overripe bananas at rock-bottom prices and hauling them through working-class neighborhoods. He shouted through the streets, "Fresh bananas, sweet and ready to eat." People laughed at first, but soon they came running. The fruit sold fast, and day by day, coin by coin, Samuel built something no one else saw coming. But it wasn't easy. Rain would soak his cart, spoil the fruit. Other vendors mocked him. He pushed through it all, driven not by pride, but by hunger. Not his own, but the hunger of those who now depended on him for affordable food. By 1903, Samuel had over $100,000 in the bank, a staggering amount at the time. But the boy who once collected trash off the docks didn't stop there. He set his sights further south, on the lush jungles of Honduras. There, in a land foreign and wild, he bought his own banana plantations. No longer would he depend on others' waste. He would grow his own. Samuel Zemurray became known as the Banana King, a man who built an empire from fruit that no one else wanted. His story wasn't just about bananas. It was about grit, vision, and the refusal to let opportunity rot on the ground. To the world, he had picked up a dying piece of fruit. But to him, he had picked up a future. The air was thick with humidity as Samuel Zemurray stepped off the rickety riverboat and onto the muddy soil of his banana plantation in the heart of the Honduran jungle. His boots sank slightly into the damp earth, but he didn't flinch. This was his land now, his gamble, his future. Around him, workers moved steadily under the sun, hauling, planting, sweating. But Samuel wasn't there just to oversee from a distance. He lived among them, ate with them, worked beside them. Every leaf, every crate of bananas, every whisper in the campfire light, he listened, he learned. Back in Boston, executives at United Fruit sat in clean suits behind polished desks, reading market reports and analyzing numbers. But Samuel? He read people. He studied the rhythm of trade at local ports, spoke directly to fruit vendors, watched ships come and go. While United Fruit relied on experts and distant forecasts, Samuel trusted the dirt on his hands and the instincts forged by hunger and hustle. By the time the 1930s rolled in, United Fruit was faltering. Profits shrank, stock prices wobbled, investors panicked. But not Samuel. He wasn't scared. He had seen the writing on the wall before anyone else. While others searched for economic advisors and legal consultants, Samuel visited the docks. He shook hands with men who loaded crates, shared coffee with traders, and mapped out the real pulse of the fruit trade. And when the moment came, he acted. He bought in, big. The man once mocked as a banana peddler now held the reins of the largest fruit company in the world. He didn't celebrate with champagne or lavish dinners. Instead, he walked the rows of banana trees he had planted years before and whispered to himself, "No one knows this land like I do." It wasn't luck. It wasn't theory. It was grit, lived experience, and a deep belief that no expert, no matter how polished, could know your vision better than you. Samuel proved that success doesn't always come from the boardroom. Sometimes it comes from the jungle, from the mud, the sweat, and the unshakable faith that your own hands are the best compass you'll ever have. The heat in the Honduran jungle was stifling that afternoon as Samuel Zimmeré stood with his advisors under the swaying canopy of banana trees, staring at a worn, weather-stained map. Before him lay the perfect stretch of land, fertile, flat, and strategically positioned between Honduras and Guatemala. It was exactly what he needed to expand his growing empire. But there was a problem. The land had two owners, both claiming full rights to the property, and no one, not lawyers, not land agents, could determine who was truly in the right. Back in the U.S., his advisors wrung their hands, urging caution. "Let us investigate," they said. "Let us determine the true owner before moving forward." They warned of lawsuits, of wasted capital, of scandal. But Samuel didn't have time for bureaucratic games. He didn't need endless paperwork. He needed action. The fruit business was unforgiving. A single season lost could cost millions. So under the thick jungle sun, Samuel made a decision that would define him. He bought the land, twice. He sat down with the first man, signed a contract, and handed over the money. Then, just hours later, he found the second man, did the same, and walked away with both receipts in his coat pocket. Some called him reckless. Others said he was foolish. But Samuel smiled. "It's just land," he said, "and now it's mine." While his competitors were tangled in red tape and courtrooms, Samuel's workers were already planting, harvesting, building. Months later, when United Fruit's board was still debating legal options, Zimmeré's plantation was already exporting bananas by the ton. In that bold, unorthodox moment, Samuel proved something most businessmen never dare admit. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is the simplest. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for perfect clarity. When the path is murky and the stakes are high, act decisively. Own the risk, and you just might own the reward. He didn't just cut through complexity, he refused to let it rule him. And in doing so, he carved a trail through the jungle not just for his company, but for a new kind of leadership. One grounded in instinct, not in decision. It was a quiet afternoon in a small furniture store tucked away on a street corner in Midtown Manhattan. The owner, a gray-haired man with a kind face and a reputation for doing honest business, had just wrapped up a transaction with a customer named Tom. Tom had ordered a custom mattress, paid a $200 deposit, and promised to settle the rest upon delivery. Everything seemed straightforward, until the delivery day came. When the store's delivery team arrived at the address Tom provided, they were met by a woman who opened the door with a puzzled look. "There's no Tom here," she said firmly. Confused, the team double-checked the address. It matched the one on the invoice. But Tom was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks. The store owner called every number he had, sent letters, even printed flyers. Nothing. Most business owners would have sold the mattress to someone else, written it off as a loss. But not this man. He believed in something stronger than profit. He believed in trust. He instructed his team to place the mattress in the back room and wait. "He'll come back," he said with unwavering conviction. Months passed. The mattress collected dust, but the store owner refused to move it. Eventually, he sold the store to a longtime friend, passing along not only the keys and the customer list, but also the promise. If Tom ever returns, he said, make sure he gets his mattress. 5 years later, on a rainy morning, a man limped into the shop. His eyes scanned the room before landing on the back wall where the mattress, though faded, still sat upright. I think I left something here, he said softly. It was Tom. He had been in a near-fatal accident and spent years recovering. Only recently had he regained his memory. Tears welled in his eyes when the new owner told him the mattress had been waiting all this time. We never gave up on you, he said. In business and in life, reputation isn't built on perfect timing or shiny promises. It's built on doing what's right, even when no one is watching. Because money can be earned again. But trust, once lost, is almost impossible to buy back. The man sat slumped on a rusted bench in the corner of the park, his hands trembling as he raised a cheap bottle of whiskey to his lips. His tie was loosened, his shirt stained with days of sweat and regret. His eyes were red, not just from the alcohol, but from the weight of failure. To anyone passing by, he looked like another lost soul. And maybe he was. Moments earlier, he had whispered to himself, "It's over. I've lost everything." A soft voice interrupted the silence. "Mind if I sit?" An older gentleman, dressed modestly but neatly, took a seat beside him. In one hand, he held a small, worn book. In the other, a half-eaten apple. The drunk man grunted but didn't object. The stranger glanced over and asked gently, "Rough day?" The man scoffed. "Day? Try year. Business failed. Money gone. I'm a walking disaster." He rubbed his face, fighting back tears. "Everything I worked for? Gone." The stranger nodded slowly, thoughtful. Then he asked, "Do you have a family?" The man hesitated. "Yeah, wife, 2 kids." "Are you healthy?" The stranger continued. "Can you walk, speak, see, hear?" The man looked confused. "Of course I can." "Then, my friend," the old man said quietly, "you haven't lost everything. You've lost money, that's all. And money can be earned again." The man stared at the stranger, something shifting in his eyes. The stranger smiled. "I once lost everything too, but I kept waking up. Every day I got another shot, another chance. As long as you're breathing, you haven't lost the game. You're just in halftime." The wind picked up, scattering a few leaves at their feet. For the first time in weeks, the man let out a laugh, short and uncertain, but real. He stood up, unsteady but taller. "Thanks," he said. "I don't even know your name." "Doesn't matter," the stranger replied, waving with a smile as he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sometimes the greatest wealth is perspective. And sometimes a stranger on a park bench can hand you something more valuable than a check. He can hand you your life back. David had always been that guy, the one who was always late. Late to work, late to dates, late to life. He didn't mean to be. In fact, every morning he swore today would be different. But something always happened. The alarm didn't go off, the coffee spilled, the dog ran off with his shoe. It was as if the universe conspired against him. One day, his friend Mark invited him to play tennis. 7 p.m. sharp, Mark warned. And this time, don't be late. David laughed. "Come on, man, I'll be there. Promise." But that night, David showed up at 7:17. Traffic, of course. Mark didn't say much, but the next day he added a new rule. Every minute you're late, you owe me $1. David rolled his eyes but agreed. How hard could it be? It turned out very hard. Each evening brought a new excuse: misplaced keys, a dead phone, forgotten socks. One day it was the elevator. Another, the GPS rerouted him. By the end of the week, David owed $14. And for the first time, he didn't laugh it off. He sat alone in his apartment and finally asked himself, why does this keep happening? And then it hit him. He had made lateness part of his identity. Deep down, he believed he was just the kind of guy who's always late. And that belief had shaped his reality. Even on the days when nothing went wrong, he would linger, watch one more video, scroll a little more, convince himself he had time. And then he was late again. The next morning, David did something different. He woke up early. Not just on time, but early. He got dressed, made coffee, and sat in silence. No distractions, no delays. That night, he showed up to tennis at 6:45. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Who are you, and what have you done with David?" David grinned. "Turns out I'm not always late. I just thought I was." From that day forward, things changed. Not overnight and not perfectly, but steadily. Because David learned a truth that transformed his life. Your reality follows your identity. When you believe something about yourself long enough, the universe lines up to prove you right, good or bad. And when you change that belief, everything else starts to change too. In a high-rise hotel lobby in Hong Kong, the soft clinking of porcelain cups echoed as Li Yathan stirred his tea. His demeanor was calm, but his eyes were sharp, always observing. Across from him sat a young man, barely in his 30s, clutching a worn leather folder. He looked nervous yet hopeful. This was his moment. "I have a real estate proposal," the young man began, voice trembling slightly. "It's not large scale, but I believe it has high potential. I can secure 5% profit for investors." Before he could finish, Li Jiathan raised his hand gently. "Why only 5%? The young man blinked, unsure. "It's a conservative estimate. Safe." Li Jiathan smiled, then leaned forward. "I'll take 10%, and you will be in charge of managing it." The young man froze, stunned. Did he hear that right? "You're smart," Li Jiathan continued, "but smart means nothing if you don't get a chance to prove it. So I'm giving you one." That single moment changed everything. The project became a quiet success, then a booming one. And the young man? He rose quickly, not just because of the opportunity, but because he had the drive to match it. Years later, when asked about his meteoric rise, he always said, "Li Jiathan was my greatest blessing. He saw something in me when no one else did." But when the press asked Li Jiathan about it, he simply replied, "He was already excellent. I just moved the stone off his path." Behind that humble answer, though, was a truth only the wise recognize. Queen Yun, noble people, mentors, don't just appear randomly. They show up when you're ready. Because opportunity is like a key, it only turns when it meets the right lock. And if you aren't prepared, it passes you by like wind through open fingers. If you want to meet extraordinary people, become someone extraordinary. Queen Yun will see your light when it starts to shine. But until then, you have to build the fire yourself. And the fire starts with skill, with hunger, with doing the work when no one is watching, so that one day, someone will. In a dusty village road, lined with fading prayer flags and worn cobblestones, a frail woman stumbled forward, eyes swollen from days of weeping. Her husband, once a gentle, hard-working man, had been thrown into prison after angering a local official. Desperate and alone, she had sold nearly everything they owned, including their small home, in a desperate attempt to pay for legal aid. And now, with the last pouch of silver tied to her waist, she had one final journey to plead for his release. But fate had other plans. Somewhere along the way, the pouch slipped loose and fell silently onto the path behind her. She didn't notice. Hours later, a man in tattered clothes and a bent leg hobbled along the same road. He was a beggar, crippled, hungry, forgotten by society. When his foot struck something soft, he looked down and saw the pouch. His heart pounded. It was heavy. Enough silver to eat for years. To live without begging, to vanish into the world and start anew. But instead of joy, a strange ache settled in his chest. He looked up at the pale sky, then down the road. Someone had to be desperate to lose that much money. What if it was for medicine? A child's life? A dying parent? He sat beside the path and waited. Hours passed. Then in the distance he saw her, the woman, exhausted and searching with frantic eyes. "Did you drop this?" he asked, voice quiet. When she opened the pouch and burst into tears, he knew. Returning it had been the right choice. The woman used the silver to free her husband. Together, they rebuilt their life, working hard and saving every coin. But they never forgot the man who had returned their hope. Years later, they found him again, this time walking on both legs. He smiled, unaware of the miracle in his own story. The night he returned that pouch, he dreamed of two celestial figures, lifting his broken limbs. And when he woke up, he could walk. Their lives intertwined from that moment on. Because as the old saying goes, virtue is stronger than fate. You can't always control what life hands you, but your character? That's yours to shape. So if this story touched something in your heart, follow for more timeless stories, because sometimes one short tale can shift an entire life.